Hello and welcome to Extra Minutes, the 60 Minutes podcast. I'm Amelia Adams and I'm joined today by our producer, Nichola Younger. Nikki, hello.
Hi.
We have done a story on something that people are probably seeing everywhere on our roads and footpaths, which is e-bikes. And it seems to have really struck a chord.
Certainly has. It's one where, for us who have been working on it for a long time, I feel like I get a little bit of PTSD when I walk outside because they are everywhere at the moment. And obviously, we've had 4 e-bike deaths in a matter of months. One of the youngest only being 8 years of age, only a few weeks ago on the Sunshine Coast.
That's right. Absolutely tragic.
It's very topical.
Yeah, and I think that's why we started looking into this, because it seems like every day there was a story in the news about, a pedestrian being mowed down on a footpath or a road accident. And as you say, more and more involving children and teens. And in fact, one of the beautiful families that we had the privilege of spending some time with as we filmed this story over a matter of weeks was the Gag family, who lost their 17-year-old son, Hudson, in such a sad and, quite a sort of a common accident. It could easily happen to anyone.
Yeah, this particular accident happened on just outside Burleigh Heads. Hudson was on the back of a fat bike, is what they're kind of known.
Yeah, and it was a 2-seater, we should point out.
Yes,
so that was
a 2-seater.
Totally legal for him to be on the back.
Yeah, his best mate had only bought the bike for 14 days beforehand, so 2 weeks, and he had said that he had issues with the brakes and had taken it back to be, serviced, etc. The 2 of them were coming down a hill. The brakes failed. The investigation is still underway, so we're not 100% sure if that is what has happened, but the driver of the bike was saying that the brakes had failed.
Yeah, and he's got some very, very serious life-changing injuries.
Yeah.
But Hudson was thrown off and
their bike
died almost instantly.
They went through the stop sign and they slammed into a car.
Yeah, I think one of the saddest parts of this story was hearing Hudson's parents, Gillian and Jason, describe being called to that scene, arriving at the scene where they could see the bike rider, who was very badly injured, but their own son in front of them being worked on by paramedics, and basically, watching him die. And they're really calling for tougher laws and changes to the regulations, which kind of got us having a look at what the rules and regulations are. And it's so confusing.
It's very confusing. There is a lot of grey area when it comes to e-bikes.
And it varies from state to state.
Varies from state to state. Back in 2021, the government softened importation rules and basically changed the classification of what an e-bike is.
Well, that's the key point, isn't it? Because they're not classified as road vehicles anymore. So most of them are classified as a bicycle. Yep, but they've got a motor on them.
Yeah, under Australian law, the bike mustn't go over 25 kilometres an hour.
That's right.
And must be assisted by pedalling. And if you're not pedalling, it's essentially a motorbike.
It's a motorbike. Yes. So if you watch, and we see it all the time now, like you, I'm looking out for them. And if someone's going along the straight or even up a hill and they're not pedalling, that bike is probably been fiddled with or modified. And we also saw we learned how easy it is to modify.
Very much so.
An e-bike to go over 25 Ks.
Yeah. I think that's the thing, is a lot of kids are going on YouTube or going into e-bike shops, retailers, and it is very easy to tamper with them. Some people have been recorded at speeds of 90 kilometres an hour. And the other thing about it as well is they're not wearing the correct protective wear.
That's right.
So a lot of them are wearing helmets, which, even if they were to come off at those speeds, would do nothing.
Would not be protected.
They should be wearing some kind of like a motocross or a motorbike helmet. It's an issue I don't think that's going away anytime soon. Certainly even around the office in the last few days, we've had so many people, talk about e-bikes and I've nearly been run over. Or
kids are asking for them for Christmas. It's that time of
year.
Timely. Yeah. Another really sad, I thought, but poignant warning we had was from the Yunus family. Yeah. The parents of 14-year-old Mohammed Yunus, 14 years old. Yeah. He had only had his e-bike, which really was an e-motorbike, for 1 week.
Yeah.
And his parents, they ordered it online. They thought of it as an e-bike.
Yep.
Which
I think a lot of parents do.
Indeed. And they really bought it for him to ride on private property, which is another loophole that we should mention, because it was legal for him at 14 to ride that on his mate's rural property.
Yeah, and even on his, in his own...
Private property.
Private property, so on his driveway.
Right.
That's fine. But once you take that bike or e-motorbike onto streets...
public roads.
Yeah, his tragic accident happened in a park. He was wearing a helmet. They're not 100% sure what he hit. I guess it might have been a groove or something in the
little
park.
pothole
or something. And the bike he's come over the handlebars and the bike's landed on top of him.
The thing about Mohammed's story, I think, is, that it shows he really was riding safely, and there's CCTV of him in that path in Sydney South, hands on the handlebar, as you say, correct safety wear, helmet. The bike was too heavy, it was too powerful for a 14-year-old. When something went wrong, he couldn't manage it. Yeah. And that was the bottom line.
Yeah, and circling back to Hudson's case as well, and Hudson's dad, Jason, says this. I think the other thing about this is a lot of kids, are riding these very powerful, e-bikes, so they're called, but they've never spent any time on the roads. They've never spent their hours doing their L's.
That's right.
And they're navigating traffic.
Yeah.
And Jason says in the case of his son, maybe if they had known to veer onto the grass, it might have helped them slow down.
Having that road awareness that you have when you start driving.
Totally.
Which you don't have at 14, 15, 16, really even 17.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. They're not licensed, they're not registered. And they're hooning around. Well, not all of them are hooning around, but they're doing speeds, which, I've been on one of these e-bikes before. And they do travel very quickly.
Propelled. And I think even as an adult, the first few times I rode one, I wasn't used to that.
Yes.
So as a child or a teenager who doesn't have that road experience, nowhere did I see this more than when we went on patrol with police in Newcastle, in New South Wales. We wanted to see what police are up against when it comes to enforcement, because there's so much confusion from parents, from, a lot of bike shops are selling these bikes and then handing out the code that you pop into the display, which makes the bike go over 25 k's an hour.
Yeah.
And I was really gobsmacked. Within minutes, it became clear to me that almost every e-bike pulled over was going over 25k, was not pedal assist, and you had 14 and 15-year-olds riding around on bikes that were unregistered, they're unlicensed, it's illegal.
Yeah. I mean, those boys in that particular clip in our story, they got away, with just a warning. But there's upwards of $3,000 fine.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, riding an unregistered vehicle, unlicensed, huge fines.
Huge fines. And, in that particular with these boys, if they're, obviously details have been noted, if they are caught again, their bikes will be seized as well. Yeah, it was interesting because, the police, the officers rang all their parents. Yeah. And just hearing the parents' response, most of them, and, maybe some did know, but, most of them were genuinely shocked that their child had been caught on, what do you mean it's illegal? I bought it at the bike shop in town, and it only, it's 500 watt, which is the New South Wales standard. It's 250 elsewhere. So parents are confused. I don't think, I think most of those teenagers sort of knew that they probably were not abiding by the law. Yeah, I mean, this is the thing as well. I think parents, it's this fine line of trying to, a lot of their kids are begging for these things. And I don't think, even when we were researching for this story, there is so much grey area, and, it had us at times like, is this right? Is this wrong? What is compliant? What is not compliant? Totally. Could my child ride this? Absolutely. Yeah, and so I do understand with parents going online or even to the shop, they're hoping that, the laws that are in place should be in place for a particular reason, and this is the way it should be. And you spoke to the Transport Minister? Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think what we discovered is, the regulations aren't working. As I said, the road regulatory system in Australia is set up for cars, and the Federal Transport Minister, Catherine King, acknowledges that and acknowledges that something has to change. The federal government is responsible for the Road Vehicles Act, which regulates road vehicles, but because they're not classified as road vehicles, it becomes a state issue. Yes. So there has been a lot of, we could say handballing to the states, and I know the bicycle industries have felt that the federal government's been handballing into the states. Yep. The federal government says, well, what is allowed on each state and territory's roads is actually a state issue. And I do see that point. But as I said to her, that system clearly is not working. Yeah. And I think the government realises that, because the Federal Transport Minister is meeting with state transport ministers to basically discuss overhauling the regulations. Yeah, updating them. Yeah, I mean, even if something comes of that, it's going to be, you know, months, if not, you know, a year, or, you know,
Yeah.
to try and bring everything into a line with it all. I was just reading this morning that a whole lot of schools, several private schools in Sydney, have banned or restricted riding of e-bikes on their campuses, obviously, you know,
Yep.
off the back of deaths, injuries. You also went into St. Vincent's Hospital as well, and
Yeah, that was really interesting as well, because I think, you know, what everyone in this story has been saying to us, from the grieving families to police to the Transport Minister herself, is that people don't realise they're not just bicycles. They have this power, and nowhere was that more evident than in St Vincent's Hospital. Now, they were so alarmed by the increase in e-bike accidents that have been coming in their doors to their emergency department that about 2 years ago they started actually tracking the data. It's another problem. There's been such a fast explosion in popularity of e-bikes on our roads. No one's actually keeping, there's no national register, there's no data. So individual hospitals have now sort of started tracking their own figures. St Vinny's was wild. I think, you know, they said they've noticed a double. It's doubling every year, the amount of accidents. They'd treated 150 people just in the first 6 months of this year. So they're saying this is at crisis point. Again, something needs to change in the regulations, but that people just don't realise they're not just getting on a bike. And they see a lot of people who, they're an inner city hospital, St Vincent's, so people jumping on those ride-share bikes, often going to or coming home from the pub.
Yeah. I mean, and they are convenient for that, aren't they?
Absolutely.
You know, it makes, you know, total sense rather than waiting around for an
They
Uber
are. And look,
or
you
a
know,
taxi.
They're cheap, they're convenient, they're great for the environment, and I don't think any of us would argue with that.
No.
But as the head of trauma at St Vincent said, you know, 60% of the e-bike accidents they see come through their door were not wearing helmets.
Yeah, wow.
50%.
Yeah.
Were either intoxicated, drugs, alcohol. So people kind of not thinking, oh, this is a motorbike, I should put a helmet on. Just jumping on, might have had a few drinks, I'll be right, it's just a bike. It's not just a bike, was sort of the prevailing message that I left that hospital with. And, I mean, they showed us some of the x-rays.
Oh, I saw,
It's like actually hard to look at, you know, that shows how powerful the bikes are to get those injuries. And indeed, you know, we spoke to Mitchell Whelan, who was a patient at St Vincent's, who really is lucky to be alive.
Yeah, he was really positive. I mean, he's still obviously going through a lot of rehabilitation. You know, he physically, you know, his eye, he had to build up around
a lot of
his
metal
eye.
plates in his eye. And again, you know, he'd had a couple of drinks at lunch, jumped on an e-bike with friends to get to a pub, clipped a truck, and
he doesn't really remember much of it, does he?
He says he doesn't remember. He was in a coma for 11 days.
Yeah.
But, you know, severe brain injury, life-changing, lifelong injuries. And as you say, he's really focused on a recovery and getting back to work. So he kind of is one of the lucky ones.
Yeah.
But, you know, he said, having had this experience, I want people to know it's got a motor. Think of it like a motorbike.
Yeah. I guess that was the whole point of our story is, and I think that's been the feedback, is that a lot of parents, you know, stayed up a little bit later on Sunday night with their children to watch it, to basically just illustrate that, you know, these things are very powerful.
Yep.
And just be very mindful, you know, about hopping on them, because, you know, they aren't like a
normal
bike.
bicycle. What I found interesting as well is almost everyone we spoke to on our story, from, you know, the bicycle industry experts to the grieving parents, Mitchell Whelan, who has a brain injury himself, everyone had an idea of, you know, what needs to change.
Yes.
Hudson Gagg's father said he'd like to see licensing, you know, for children and for teenagers. Mitchell Whelan suggested that perhaps with the Lime bikes, you know, because they're operated through an app, you have to be wearing a helmet before it can actually turn on.
Yeah.
Which is an
It's
odd
also
idea.
been about an idea with Lime bikes is that you have to have a breathalyzer. I think that was from...
That came from the head of trauma, Dr. Anthony Grabs at St Vincent. So everyone had suggestions. And look, everything is on the table, is what the federal government told us. The Transport Minister, Catherine King, basically said they will look at classifying e-bikes as road vehicles, but that is a huge kind of wide net. They have to then look at product standards.
Yeah.
Because of course a lot of the bits are coming in parts, which is quite hard to control. Going back to your point about importation.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, because those laws have been watered down.
Yeah.
products that don't meet Australian standards are coming in. Yeah. Hudson Gagg's investigation is still underway, and Jason, his father, said that it could be that those brakes did not weren't up to the standard or holding the weight of the two boys. Even though it allowed you to have two boys on it, it might be that those brakes, are not up to scratch for that.
So it's product standard. Do people need a license to ride e-bikes? Then you've got to look at registration. Then there's how police enforce any new product standards. So there's a whole raft of things that the federal government with the state transport ministers will be looking at later this month.
Hopefully something comes out of it. I mean, I guess at the end of the day as well in our story, we found it hard as well because there are so many varying rules and regulations per state alone, let alone on a national level.
Mohammed Yunus's parents did say ban e-bikes, and you can understand why they are, angry and frustrated and grieving.
Yes.
But most people aren't saying ban them. They're just saying there's now so many of them on our roads. There's no clear regulation. Yeah. It's too easy for young people, but also adults, to ride them illegally. And we do see those ride-outs on, gosh, how many did we look at TikTok and Instagram, where you've got like gangs of teenagers and they're up on the back wheel, and it's injury and death waiting to happen.
Totally. And I mean, I don't think it's that we don't want to be the fun police.
Right.
We don't want to be like ban them completely or whatever, but I think there needs to be some, rules and regulations about how we operate these things to try, and I guess that's the point of our story as well, and that's part of the reason why these families spoke, even Mitchell as well, if they can try and, stop one more injury or one more death.
And one more family going through what they've gone through.
Totally, yeah.
Well, the good news is the federal government, although in my opinion a little too late, has committed to looking at this and to making some changes, and possibly, I mean, the system honestly needs a whole overhaul, so we'll wait to see what comes of that. Yep. But in the meantime, if you missed our story, you can watch it on the 60 Minutes YouTube channel or on 9 Now.